Hello and welcome to the Worship Hearts podcast. This is season 2, episode number 5. This is also part 2 of our 3-part series with Pastor Chris Legg of South Spring Baptist Church here in Tyler, Texas. And we're continuing the discussion this week of the items located inside the tabernacle, the 4 items there. So we're going to recap just briefly. What we kind of concluded with last week and finish out the 4 items located in the temple. So stay tuned. It's a great episode. You should learn a lot this week.
Then we did, let's see, the showbread table,
Yeah.
which was fascinating. Exodus 25, starting verse 23. You shall make a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits its length, 36 inches, a cubit its breadth, 18 inches, and a cubit and a half its height, 27 inches. You shall overlay it with pure gold and make a molding of gold around it. Again, like you said, super levels of detail.
Yeah.
Although probably not enough if you're the one having to make it. You're probably like, wait, does he mean 2 ridges? And we know that because we see artistic renderings and they don't look the same. People are like, did he mean this? Did he mean anyway? Yeah. And then you had the showbread table, and we talked about acacia wood, what it was, and the plates and dishes and incense and flagons and bowls. So there was all kinds of things on this table. Oil and incense and other things, which makes sense. There really wasn't another table in the tabernacle.
Yeah.
There wasn't another place to just set things. And so if you're going to put the incense, the oil for the menorah, or the incense for the altar, the incense altar, this is probably where those set, probably on this as well. So of course, the incense, one of the main items in the incense is frankincense, which takes us to Advent, as certainly. But our favorite part, I agree, Matt. My favorite thing in this was, once again, the opulence, the over-the-top opulence of God's table.
Yeah.
Because we uncovered this when we started in 1 Samuel, and I had never thought of it this way, that when you have Eli's sons stealing meat from people, that this was the equivalent. So when people came and had a meal at the tabernacle, they were having a meal with God. He had invited them to his home, and this is very Middle Eastern. You come to my home, and you eat my bread, and you eat everything. I gave all this to you. You just bring it. We will eat it, and we'll take it together. And that the sons of Eli taking food out of the pot with that 3-pronged fork would be just like if I had you guys over to grill, and we're all here with ribeyes, and I'm grilling ribeyes on the steak, and my neighbor just walks over here with a fork, takes a piece of ribeye, takes one of the ribeyes out with a fork, and then just walks off. Yeah. Be like, people die for less than that in Texas, right?
That's right.
Like, hey, what are you thinking? Yep. And the offense level that you see God have makes sense when you see it in terms of, what do you think you're doing? This is my house. You just came wandering into my house and took my guests' food.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, and like we talked about last week on the podcast, that parallels with Jesus coming into the temple and saying, this is not what my temple is for.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great, and we always connect that stuff to Abraham and the angels before Sodom and Gomorrah. In fact, the amount of bread made is similar. It's a similar measurement to that moment.
Interesting.
All the bread that they make here is similar. Let me see if I can find that in here.
I'm curious too, while you're looking that up.
Go ahead.
Because I've been watching back through the messages. The acacia wood, you showed a picture of the acacia tree.
Yeah.
How are they big? They look like they're relatively small. So I'm curious how they get these 8-foot, 9-foot long poles out of this twisted, mangled hardwood of a tree.
So they grow differently depending on what region of Israel or what region of the world they're in.
Okay.
The reason most of the time in Israel you see them low and kind of mangly and thorn. They're just big thorn bushes
Yeah.
in desert regions because that's how much they can grow there. But they
Wow.
grow nicer and straighter in other parts of Israel and in other parts of the Middle East.
Okay.
Um, and so, and also the other thing is acacia. That was when we discovered that there's a strong argument that acacia would have been the wood woven into the crown of thorns
Mm.
for Jesus's head. So you're like, really? I mean, okay, we can see that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Um, so the that is a oh so here's the thing, we discovered that the amount of bread made, so you shall take fine flour and bake 12 loaves from it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in each loaf. So here's what's wild: 2/10 of an ephah is the so every morning with the dew. So hold on to that. So one fifth of an ephah or 2/10 of an ephah. So 2/10 of an ephah shall be each loaf.
Hmm.
In Exodus 16, you have this is what the Lord has commanded: gather each of it. This is the gathering of manna.
Okay.
Gather each of it, each one of you, as much as he can eat. You shall take an omer. An omer is 1/10 of an ephah. And so the on the sixth day you gather twice as much,
Yeah.
2/10 of an ephah. And so each loaf was made from enough to feed someone for 2 days during the manna period. So that's
And
what
there
they
were
what
12 of them.
and there were 12 of them. Right, exactly. So it's just so over the top.
That's awesome.
Um, and then we connected that to Bethlehem, which is the house of bread. Bethlehem means house of bread, and then of course Jesus is not hard to find. Bread of life is
Yeah.
again all through there. We were just stunned. I mean,
Oh
this is
man.
what's so fun about studying scripture from a new angle is, I mean, I've taught through this stuff before, and when you look at it from a new angle, you're like, how'd I miss this?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Rob, I'm sure that happens to you all the time.
I miss a lot of things. Let me just tell you.
Me too. I don't know how pastors did it in the past before they had the internet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that part is true. There's a lot of resources that are available at your fingertips. That is true. And we have been privileged to be at Metroplex here for now a little over 16 years, and we have done a chronological reading of the scripture 4 times. They would do it one every 3 years or every third year. And so 4 times we've done this. And every time, this is what is so gorgeous about the scripture is, every time you read the same words, but something new,
Yes.
just stands out or comes out, or, I know I've read this 100 times before, you
Right.
know, and it's like, wow. So somewhere in the dynamos, the dynamic of our lives,
Yep.
scripture is able to speak into it from 2,000, 4,000 years ago. And it's
Yep.
just amazing to me.
Yep. That's when people refer to Christianity as an outdated religion, I'm always like, yeah, you've not done much research.
No.
Um, I've said many times, like, as a theologian or whatever, but as a psychologist, when I read this stuff, I am as much encouraged that these people act like real people. This does not come across as some kind of weird myth. There's no pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. There is hard things and great things and things that I scratch my head at. But okay, so the third one, the altar of incense. Our executive teaching pastor Paul McKenzie taught this one, and I love that he pointed out how simple these things are. Like
Mm.
God reveals so much through these. It's a table. I mean, it's really fundamentally, it's just a little table, a little box with a thing on the top, and yet he reveals so much. But these are clearly the prayers. These represent the prayers. It's the nearest to the curtain. It may be on the other side of the curtain, although I don't buy that. Some people argue that, but I think it's on the outside of the curtain from the Ark of the Covenant. But I love the idea that these prayers, like this altar of incense, they go up day and night. So you have this piece of furniture that's not that big. He actually just took a packing box and shaped it to the right size and brought it up on stage. Like, could that be less impressive? I mean, that's
Right.
just, you go, yeah. The horns, the symbol of power, and yet the fact that they're in their power, they're a place for a source of prayer, and the power of the prayer. Now, here's an interesting one. The altar of incense burns day and night. It burns even when the menorah is not lit.
Okay.
And I don't know what all lessons we're supposed to get from that, but I don't believe it's an accident. But our prayers, we should be constant in prayer, whether we in that moment we're experiencing emotionally God's presence or not. We keep praying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Daytime and not. So great lessons. And then finally, the ark itself. Let's see. All right. So let me go down to the passage when we get there, when the description of it. And we had taught about the ark when we were in Samuel. And so here's Exodus 25. They shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2 cubits and a half its length, 1 cubit and a half its breadth, 1 cubit and a half its height. Again, it's just not. This isn't the statue of Zeus in
Right.
Athens. I mean, this is a box.
Yeah.
It does have gold over it, and that's cool. But you shall overlay it with pure gold inside and outside, casting the rings, all that type of detail, and then the ark. And by the way, when it's first described, it's only described as a box without a lid. You get to the end of verse 16, and it says, "You shall put into the ark the testimony that I give you." And you guys already talked about from the book of Hebrews. We know what all was in the ark: the budding manna, the original tablets, and the jar of manna. Did I say the budding? What did I say? The budding?
The budding staff.
Budding staff, the budding walking stick. Yeah. And then you get the mercy seat. And I think in the first episode, you dropped the hint.
I did. Matt,
why don't you reveal this? This is too good.
After that message, I talked with mom and dad both over FaceTime or something within the next 24, 48 hours. And I'm relaying what you talked about and how hard it hit me. And I'm in tears, choked up, trying to explain what it was that you revealed in this, or what scripture talks about. And through all of the detail of the ark and all these different pieces within the tabernacle and the very specific measurements, the very specific, it has to be this way. It's got to be, covered in gold or not covered in gold. All of it, you have to have 50 loops on each piece of fabric, like
right.
Every detail except for the depth of the lid or the depth of the mercy seat, which is the space between the two cherubims on the lid of the, and
that's right. The depth.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. As you mentioned, I think you said this in the message. It would have been great to see the look on the faces of those who are trying to put that together and going, wait a minute, we're missing a measurement.
I mean, it screams at you when you're reading through it, because everything has this.
Yeah.
You put a cherubim on this end, you put a cherubim on this end. They have wings. Their wings have to face each other, and they need to spread. And it's shocking to go. If you were building it, you would go, wait, go back. How thick is this lid? I got nothing.
Call Moses. We missed something.
So, and I get no credit. This was me looking up rabbinical teaching on this stuff. So, I mean, what was the rabbinical understanding that I was blown up. I had the advantage of getting all my tears out before I have to breathe. I'm like,
oh man, yeah. It did. There is no depth to God's mercy. And my mom, who oozes mercy all the time anyway, I tease her on occasion, Mom, your mercy is showing.
Yeah.
I'm a little more practical in my application, and she's very much so. I want to help. I want to offer. I want to, do whatever I can. And that one, man, that would hit me hard. It just I literally beside myself, uh, reading through that again and hearing that and then trying to talk about it and share that with them and realizing that comparison, well, how obvious it is in scripture to say there is no depth to God's mercy, and then the gift, the one and only Son of God given for us, that is he is that mercy for us. I've heard grace and mercy defined this way. Grace is being given what we don't deserve. Mercy is being kept from what we do deserve.
Yeah.
And that we deserve death. Period.
Yeah.
Nothing more.
Yeah.
And yet God says, "No, I want to hang out. I want to get to know you. I want you to get to know me. I want to share life with you. How do we do this better? Well, here's some instructions right here."
It is and I know what you when you're saying there's no depth to God's mercy, you mean there's no limit to the depths. There's no
Yes.
bottom to his depth. There is no how deep does it go? Deeper.
Yeah.
However deep you've gone, the deeper, deeper
Yeah.
and deeper. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what God obviously we can't know for sure that that's God's intention in not putting that measurement there, but there's a lot of agreement among the
Oh man.
scholars
Sure.
that it's meant to scream out at you.
Yeah.
Sure. And that actually, as we're discussing this, I'm listening to Paul in my head saying, "Well, if grace is such a good thing, then we should sin more in order to get more grace." And and the idea, no, that's not what this means. However, if you do,
Right.
then there's still grace. There's
That's right.
still mercy. There's still love. There's still God's presence that is going to reach down into your depths as well as pull you to new heights.
Right.
So, yeah,
It's so beautiful. I remember I know there's an old hymn. We didn't sing it growing up. But Rich Mullins references in one of his songs where he talks about that there's a wideness in God's mercy that I cannot find in my own. And it's just, it's such the picture of, especially if you were raised in a version of Christianity like I was, that did not feel like a very merciful God. It
right.
felt like a God who was just waiting for me to mess up so he could kick me out of his house back into the orphanage.
Yeah.
And the idea here that there's such a depth, there is such a width to his mercy that and it's fascinating. And by the way, as we talked about, this was the one that, again, the first time I saw it, you're like, how do you miss this? That at the tomb that is specifically described, sitting on the seat where Jesus' body had laid, are two angels. And it's the description of their presence is so similar to the description of the mercy seat is now, it says, listen to so John 20, 11 and 12, Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the foot. And I don't think that's meant to be subtly secretive. Like,
Mm-mm.
I think you're supposed to go, and there's the mercy seat.
Yeah.
Right there. It's
Wow.
where the body of Jesus lay. That is the fulfillment, to go back to our comment an hour ago, that is the fulfillment of this picture of a mercy seat. Man. Is that moment. And so we had a lot of fun with that and unpacked that. And we even got into I was stunned, our some of our Catholic brothers and sisters, they they actually they talk about Mary as the living ark because she carried the new covenant.
Mm.
And obviously, you could take that too
Interesting.
far pretty easily, but it was an
Sure.
intriguing picture of yeah. But what struck me about that was, once again, it's not like Mary is the only human who carried the spirit of Jesus Christ. She carried the person Jesus Christ in her womb, but all of us carry the spirit of the Lord, all of us as Christians. And so that turns us into many arcs of the covenant wandering around,
Wow.
which is, again, like I said, it's wonderful and glorifying and a little bit terrifying and sobering to consider. So when it says in Colossians 3, put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, and he goes through the whole list. The thought that a Hebrew author like Paul would refer to humans as holy, and they all do it. They all, because of Christ, refer to us as partaking in the holiness of Christ, the righteousness of Christ. And that's when a Jewish person uses the word holy, he doesn't mean pretty cool or filled with holes. He means partaking in a characteristic that God has to bestow.
Wow.
And so that, again, finding Christ in these pictures and the fulfillment of him in these pictures is just, and we're going to do in a few weeks. We do a Passover. We'll do a Passover on the Wednesday after Palm Sunday. I don't even know. Rob, are you local too? Are you in Tyler too? Or are you
He's in Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City?
Yes.
You can make
Yeah.
the drive down. You can do it.
Yeah.
Maybe Passover.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to be a guest of honor at Passover. But the everything we do at Passover, it's the first time I did it. You're looking around going, how did I not know about this? Like, oh my gosh, Jesus is the fulfillment of each little piece of the Passover.
Yeah.
So again, it's just, I tell people it's one of the most exciting times. I think borrowing 1800 years ago, it is probably the most exciting time to be a Christian teaching Scripture, as we've begun to re-experience Jesus through the lens of Judaism. Not that we become Jews; that's silliness. We're not. That's an integrated concept now. We're grafted in.
Yeah.
We
Right.
don't need to change that. But if I don't know a better term, the re-Jewification of Jesus and of the Bible it's just the coolest.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love stuff like this. You get to dive in and go, what is this? So
So what do you think? And this might be a turn in our conversation a little bit, but so Pastor Chris, what do you think then is the factor or the reason why we as followers of Christ have such a difficult time to truly come into that place of worshiping in spirit and in truth?
I think the answer has to be this whole, again, back to what C.S. Lewis talks about us being amphibians. We're spirit and we're creatures. Jesus and Paul both use the term sarx in the Greek. That's not what they said. They said whatever Aramaic is for flesh. But this concept of the flesh, and for example, Jesus telling Peter the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And I think that's our, Paul crying out in Romans 6 and 7, who's going to save me from this man of flesh that I am? I keep doing what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I want to do. And I think until that glorification, when the flesh is finally, and I don't mean physical body, but when the flesh, whatever they mean, and it's kind of interesting because, and this makes sense, Jesus seems to talk about the flesh as weakness. I think it's the pathetic little child in each of us that just doesn't. I just want to feel better. I'm cold and I don't want to be cold. I'm hungry and I don't want to be hungry. I'm lonely and I don't want to be lonely.
Right.
And so I'm going to turn to whatever makes those feelings go away right now. I don't care about the morality of it. I feel lonely, so I'm going to look at something inappropriate on my devices. I feel hungry, so I'm going to eat a fourth donut, or well, you're not hungry if you're four. I just want a fourth donut, so I want it.
Yeah.
I just want what I
Yeah.
want, and I want it now. And
Right.
I think that's maybe that's similar to what Freud called the id or whatever, that there's just something in us that Jesus acknowledges that's just weak and pathetic. It's just the child. But Paul, because I think he experiences the fullness of the flesh, he thinks that he sees it more as an enemy. Like, I have to beat it into submission. I have to remind it who's boss around
Right.
here. And
Right.
I've got to fast sometimes just in order to remind my flesh, you're not in charge.
That's
And
good.
so I think I think that battle is when I sit and try to focus the troubles, if I could quote Jesus, the troubles of the world, they distract me. I read about the great, saints, even just in the last century. I'm, smoking a cigar like I'm Spurgeon or something, but the guys like him would say stuff like, I have so much to get done today that I can't imagine getting it all done without at least 3 hours of prayer. And I think, I don't get that. My flesh has not submitted to the Spirit to that degree
Right.
where I embrace that. And they're just humans. They're just humans who are just further along the path, I guess. But I think that's a big part of it, is that it's not easy for us because we are frail creatures of dust. And I think the good news about that is that teaches us to rely on Him. Like, even when I'm doing what's right, I can't even do that right. And so I can't even pray right. I can't preach right. I can't prepare right. I can't sit and have this conversation right. But this is cool. Is I think sometimes we grow up with this mentality that God is very easily frustrated with us, that He's, and I'm not meaning to bring up anything therapeutic here for fathers and sons, but the idea that it's a natural tendency as a dad, or whatever dad we grew up with, that he sends us to go get a wrench and we come back with pliers. Sometimes dads can lose their temper in that moment and be like, I said, they're under the car and they're holding back oil that's dripping down their arm, and
Yeah.
and they're like, no, kid, I said a wrench. Like, what's wrong with you? I said a wrench. Or what are you, stupid? Or we
Sure.
let go and we go get the wrench ourselves. Like, you're such a failure, and we communicate. And what we have to remember about God is, when God sends us to get a wrench, He already knows we're coming back with pliers.
Yeah.
I mean, He knew when He sent us, like, hey, go do this. I mean, you're going to totally just destroy that, but do it because apparently getting it done perfectly isn't His highest priority if He asks us to do it.
Man.
And if the things that have to be done right, creation, redemption, glorification, judgment, He reserves those for Himself because He can't trust us to do
Yes.
those.
Yeah. Wow, wow, wow. What an incredible conversation. And there's more to come. Be sure to check out South Spring Baptist Church. There'll be a link in the description below, as well as a couple of podcasts and the link to the video series that Pastor Chris preached on over the Advent season. You can find all those details down in the description. Be sure to give them a look and a listen. They are well worth it. And he does dive in a little deeper into the details on some of these elements. But this is a fantastic place to pause for just a week, get ready, because we do shift the conversation pretty drastically next week in the application elements of worship, specifically Western church worship, and what that means and what it looks like through the perspective, uh, uh, through the through the perspective of the temple and what God set up for us in instruction as worshipers. Thank you so much for being with us this week. Thank you again to Pastor Chris for being on with us. I am looking forward to, and I'm sure you are as well, next week's episode, where we conclude our 3-part series with him on temple worship. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you next week.